Well, I think the key to the answer to your objection lies in the word naive. Naive realism won't do. What we need is sophisticated realism. The world is very complicated. I don't think naive anything is going to take us very far. What we need is a very sophisticated analysis of our situation. Every artist, well, no, that's not true, because there's music, and some people say all art aspires to the condition of music. But to my mind, the visual arts all aspire to this elimination of ambiguity from communication. This is why I suppose if we were to try to create a theory of aesthetic here, I would argue that sculpture is a superior mode of communication to painting, let's say, because sculpture has an infinite number of points of view built into it, while the pictorial representation assumes a single or a very limited number of points of view. What we have to do is both contact our inner reality and then clarify our tools for communicating it. The culture cannot evolve faster than the language evolves, because remember we said last night, the culture is made out of language. And, what we are doing here at Esalen, or what you're doing when you try to persuade people to recycle, or what you're doing when you're trying to persuade people to re-examine their attitudes towards the feminine, is we're trying to get them to change their language. The bad people have always understood this very clearly. It's called propaganda. Lenin said, "Give me the child at age 7 and I will return you the man," because this seems to be how it works. What we need to do is clean up our language. There are terrible problems in English. I mean, the subject-object relationship. At least English is gender neutral. Languages which aren't are just, carry heavy freight in that department that would be very difficult to overcome. Our ultimate notice that our most powerful descriptions of reality are mathematical. Mathematics is an artificial language specifically created with the intent of eliminating ambiguity. Now, the problem is we can't all follow these mathematical languages, but we probably could if we gave it more effort. Yeah.
Terence, what vocalization and telegraphy are so miserable as tools for this all-important job of communicating, for real communication. I've often fantasized in my mind that at some dim, dark past, this species had a power of direct communication that somehow was lost. So I sort of a Babel concept. It was somehow lost. Probably because of the overloading of the networks. That would be one hypothesis. In other words, when you have too many circuits going, then people have to dream up other ways of talking with each other. But it's so inefficient to talk. I mean, our speech and our language is so hard that I can't believe that this species started out with that.
No, I think that language was evolved in an ambiance of nearly continuous psilocybin intoxication, and that what we call poetry is in fact clear speech, Ursprach, a language so powerful that its linguistic intent is directly beheld if you hear it. And the Babel myth is a good one. We have fallen into a realm of corrupted language. And somehow recovering this primal language is the task of saving the human world. And it's, it sounds airy-fairy. It's saying that poetry can save the planet. but very powerful bardic poetry of a sort that we haven't seen for several millennia. The problem is that we have a drive to communicate all kinds of things which can't be done that way. They're more complex. And so then we've created provisional languages. But I agree. I think that originally language was to communicate emotion. This glossolalia that I did this morning or whenever I did it, let me do it a little bit and then talk about it to make the point. Yidong wai huak sikipitin mundi kivi mangtiteekangquakat. Now, when you analyze that and make recordings and really analyze it, there is syntax. There is syntax, but there's no meaning. But I just did it, and I just did it at the speed of an ordinary conversation. What was happening in my brain when I did it if there was no meaning? In other words, what I did is I said to myself, take the meaning maker out of the loop, but let the language flow. Well, then from where comes the modulation, the tonality, the differences? Well, the only place it could possibly have come from is my internal state. What you just heard from me was the most honest thing I've said today. Situation reflected in a verbal exercise that was not designed to convince you or impress you or drag you into my vision of things. It was simply that's who I was at that moment. Ralph Metzner and I once had a notion of giving a workshop or a weekend in which half of all utterance would have to be in glossolalia. So that, you said, well, I'm a committed Marxist-Leninist myself. However, he stucks in me quite meeting. Say, oh, well, so he's a Marxist, but he's also this other thing. That's who he is emotionally. And then you could balance it. And you see, we suppress these internal states. We create meaning as a kind of community venture, but there's not much of us in it when we do that behavior. The paucity of words for emotions in our language is a clue to the fact that we have put too much emphasis on nuts and bolts stuff and not enough emphasis on conveying the essence of who we are. And so now we empower a special class of people called artists, and their job is to convey this essence. But what we need to do is make life into art and take upon ourselves an awareness of the responsibilities that language puts upon us. We're not going to save the world or honor the feminine or do anything worthwhile until we change the way we talk about these things. That's the first step. And, in any political agenda, the first thing they want to do is control definitions. I mean, if you define, this is what the Nazis did brilliantly. If you define someone who is Jewish as not a human being, which is what the Nazis did, they called them Untermensch, the underman, subhuman. Well, so you've changed the reality of what this person is in your mind. Now you can build ovens, deport them, put them in slave labor camps, because you've changed their essential nature by changing how you speak about them. And most of the changes we've allowed in language have been of this negative, destructive, disempowering sort. The curse of simplification, the easy answer, the glib reply. This is what our politicians, they say, well, you just cut the capital gains tax and it'll be fine. Everybody knows this is malarkey. It won't be fine. But language metaphors are being misused to delude and to keep some people on top and some people on the bottom. I think the reason we're spending so much time on this is because I think that what psychedelics do is they catalyze new forms of language. People are still, the greatest leap forward in language evolution that happened in my lifetime was under the influence of LSD in the 1960s. And people now make fun of all of that, the concept of the vibes, the concept of grokking, the concept of an ego trip, the concept of a put down. These are all, people didn't know what an ego trip was until they took LSD. There was no word in the language for that. And notice how much energy the establishment has put into denigrating the kinds of languages that evolved in the 1960s. It's penetrated everywhere. Well, that addresses a different issue, which is the meme wars. You all know, I suppose, that a meme is the smallest unit of an idea, in the same way that genes are the smallest units of heredity. Ideas are made out of memes. Any coherent notion is a meme. Women should be respected. That's a meme. It's competing against the meme that women are worthless. That's another meme. These two memes compete in this society. One leads to a certain, believing one of those memes leads to a certain set of consequences. Believing the other meme leads to a different set of consequences. Memes evolve in exactly the same way that organisms evolve. Large ideological structures can be made up of thousands of memes. The meme of democracy is a very complicated meme. It makes certain assumptions about literacy and voting and responsibility and so forth and so on. I believe that what we're involved in here is a meme war, and that the best memes will win if the playing field is level. That's why we're talking about the psychedelic experience. If we don't talk about it, it isn't a meme. It's a private obsession. It's something underground. But we bring it into competition in the environment of natural selection for applicable meaning.
Yeah, one of the things we didn't talk about.
And that's why the beginning of any social change is sort of the ambiance of that DMT state. What is the attitude of these types toward you? And it's a curious attitude. They are not entirely friendly, or they are not entirely to be trusted. And if you're a graduate of Irish fairy tale literature, you know that fairies are very, very tricky. That's essentially their major characteristic. And their sense of humor and their sense of comedy doesn't always dovetail very smoothly with our own. I've sort of described the tykes as piratical. They, when I try to remember where I've had that feeling that I have in the DMT space, where in my life I ran across that feeling before, it was in Indian markets as a child buying hashish for purposes of smuggling, and being conducted into these situations where everyone was your friend, but they had led you through such a labyrinth of streets and relieved you of all your gold and had given you a Coca-Cola and put you in a room and told you to wait and said, you know, we're your friends, not to worry. All is going to be all right. And it always was. And this is sort of the feeling you have with these things. And it came to me because at the end of this afternoon, we were talking about memes. And I had said how these things offer you these objects. I think what they are is meme traders in another dimension. And what they want is ideas. And they sort of use the technique that we would use in trading with magpies, You know how a magpie will take a piece of colored glass and, or let's shift the metaphor, pack rats. Are you all familiar with pack rats? I grew up in the high mountains of Colorado where pack rats exist. And pack rats are traders. They will always leave something for what they take. And so the trick is to get them to leave something more valuable than what they take. And there are numerous anecdotal stories in Colorado about leaving a 7-Up cap out and getting back a diamond wedding ring in trade, because the pack rats, like one way, a way when I was a kid, we used to hunt treasure in old ghost towns. And the way we would do it is we would look for huge abandoned or not abandoned pack rat nests. And there in the pack rat nest, you would discover watches, coins, jewelry, rings, and broken glass, bobby pins, bottle caps, all the detritus. So the DMT creatures are mean traders of some sort. And what they're offering, these things they're offering, are the equivalent of glass beads. They're saying, this is the sort of thing a quasi-intelligent primate ought to be able to respond to. How would you like this? Oh, wow, let me have that. Well, just a moment. Can't you give us a piece of your folklore or a chunk of religious ontology or a little bit of political philosophy, and then we'll give you the bauble. And so there is a trading.